Somebody help! Rain was falling in sheets that night. Not the gentle kind that whispers on rooftops, but the kind that pounds the earth like punishment. The sky flashed white, thunder cracking through the darkness, and the swollen river near Willow Creek Bridge roared like an angry beast. Amara's worn sneakers slapped through the mud as she ran, her breath jagged and her chest burning. She could barely see through the storm, but she'd heard it. The scream, a child's scream, high and desperate, vanishes into the crash of the water. "Help! Somebody help!" Her voice broke through the storm, but no one answered. The town never came out to this side. Not for her, not for anyone who lived past the tracks. But Amara didn't hesitate. She kicked off her shoes and plunged into the icy river. The current seized her instantly, pulling her under. The water was freezing, numbing, alive with danger. Her lungs screamed for air, but then she saw it. A pale hand breaking the surface, small fingers clawing for life. She pushed harder, fighting the pull, her arms aching with the weight of the storm. She caught him. A boy no older than 10, limp and terrified, his lips blue. Amara dragged him toward the bank, every stroke a war. Her body burned, her throat raw from gasping, but she wouldn't let go. When they finally reached the shore, she collapsed beside him, shivering violently. She pressed her trembling hands to his chest, whispering, "Come on, breathe, please, breathe." For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sputter and a cough, water gushed from his mouth, and he gasped. Amara let out a sob of relief. Lightning flashed again, illuminating his face. Her heart froze. She knew that boy. Everyone in town. Did. Eli Crane, the sheriff's son. Tayambay, Sadiyu, same sheriff who'd called her people troublemakers, who'd once told her, grandmother, she'd never be worth saving, and now his son lay in her arms, alive only. Because of her, as thunder rolled overhead, Amara stared down at the boy and whispered, half in disbelief, half in fear, "What have I just done?" Morning sunlight crept across the cracked window pane, casting a dull amber glow over the room. The smell of wet soil drifted in through the open door, the same river scent that clung to Amara's hair and clothes. She hadn't slept, not after last night. The boy was safe now. She'd left him at the clinic before anyone noticed her, but her mind replayed every second. His face pale under the lightning, his chest rising again after she thought he was gone. She stirred the porridge quietly, careful not to wake her grandmother. The older woman's frail breathing filled the silence, each inhale sounding like a fragile promise that tomorrow might still come. Amara's life had always been small but heavy, like the pots she carried from the well every morning before sunrise. She lived in a sagging one-room shack on the edge of town, where the streetlights stopped working years ago and even the mailman refused to come. At 17, she had already learned that dreams were a luxury people like her couldn't afford. She'd dropped out of school when her grandmother's lungs started failing, taking a job cleaning rooms at the Silver Pines Motel. The pay barely covered food and medicine, but Amara never complained, because complaining didn't change anything in Willow Creek. In this town, people like Amara were invisible until something went wrong, and when something did go wrong, they were the first to be blamed. Sheriff Douglas Crane made sure of that. His word was law, his glare enough to silence an entire crowd. Amara still remembered the day he came to their side of town years ago, after a store was robbed. He'd looked at her, a 12-year-old girl, and said, "You people always got excuses." Since then, his hatred had been a constant shadow over him. It showed in how shopkeepers followed her in stores, how the bus driver pretended not to see her raised hand, and how kids whispered, "river rat," when she walked by. And yet, despite all of it, Amara kept her heart soft. She found peace in caring for her grandmother, humming lullabies, and watching fireflies gather near the porch when the world felt too cruel to face. That morning, as she set a bowl of thin porridge by the bedside, her grandmother stirred and smiled weakly. "You didn't sleep again, did you?" Amara shook her head. "Just couldn't stop thinking." Her grandmother's cloudy eyes softened. "Whatever it is, baby, God saw it. And He knows your heart." Amara forced a smile, though her chest tightened. If God saw everything, then He would have seen her save the son of the man who hated her the most. Outside, the town was already buzzing. People gathering at the diner, voices sharp and curious. Amara could almost hear them. "Did you hear about the sheriff's boy? Found unconscious near the river. Some say he was pulled out just in time." Her hand trembled as she wiped the table clean. She prayed no one would ever find out who it was that saved him. Because in Willow Creek, truth didn't set people like her free. It only set them on fire. By noon, Willow Creek was buzzing like a hornet's nest. News of Eli Crane's rescue spread faster than wildfire. And, like wildfire, it burned truth to ash. At the diner, men in damp hats leaned over their coffee, muttering about how something didn't add up. At the hardware store, whispers slithered between aisles. "They say that black girl was seen near the bridge last night." By evening, Amara could feel the stairs like thorns pricking her skin. She tried to keep her head down as she left the motel, clutching her worn coat tighter. But whispers followed her out the door. "Strange, how she always shows up when there's trouble." "Maybe she was after the reward." "Wouldn't surprise me. They'll do anything for attention." Amara kept walking, jaw clenched. She'd done nothing wrong. She'd saved a life. But in this town, a girl like her wasn't meant to be a hero. By sunset, a dusty pickup rolled up to her shack. The engine idled loud enough to shake the windows. Sheriff Crane stepped out, his boots crunching on gravel, eyes cold as a winter storm. He didn't knock. He just stood there, towering over her doorstep, the brim of his hat dripping rain. "You were near the river last night," he said flatly. It wasn't a question. Amara swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I heard screaming. Don't sir me," he snapped. "You expect me to believe my boy just happened to fall into the river and you just happened to be there?" His voice was low, but it carried a venomous tone. "I didn't hurt him," Amara said quietly. "I pulled him out." Don't lie to me." His hand slammed the porch rail, splintering the wood. "You think saving him makes you special? You think you can use my son to get sympathy from this town?" Tears stung her eyes, but she held them back. "No, Sheriff. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to help." He took a step closer, his breath heavy with tobacco and anger. "Stay away from my family," he growled. "And don't you go telling people you were there. If I hear your name in this again, I'll make sure you regret it." When he left, the silence was heavier than before. Amara stood frozen on the porch until the sound of his truck disappeared down the road. Inside, her grandmother's weak voice called out, "Who was that, baby?" Amara wiped her face quickly. "Just someone from work." But her grandmother wasn't fooled. "You did something good, didn't you?" Amara hesitated. Then she nodded, tears finally slipping free. "But they'll never see it that way." The next day, the motel manager called her into his office. His voice was uncomfortable, his eyes avoiding hers. "Look, Amara, folks are talking. The sheriff came by, said it might be best if we let you go, just for a while." Her heart sank. "I didn't do anything wrong," he sighed. "I know, kid. But this town doesn't care about right or wrong. It cares about peace. And the sheriff keeps the peace." By the time she walked home, the world had grown quieter. Even the wind seemed to avoid her. At the general store, two women turned their backs as she passed. Children stopped playing when she came near. She was no longer invisible. She was poisonous. That night, Amara sat by her grandmother's bed, listening to the older woman's labored breathing. The oil lamp flickered weakly, its light trembling like her heart. She whispered into the silence. "I only wanted to do the right thing." Outside, thunder rumbled again. Softer this time, but still there. In Willow Creek, storms never really ended. They just waited for someone like her to walk back into the rain. Days turned into weeks, but the stares never stopped. Amara learned to walk through them, head high, expression blank, as if the whispers were just the wind. She'd lost her job, and soon the landlord came knocking. He didn't need to say much. The look in his eyes said it all. "Sorry, Amara," he muttered, pretending to sound sympathetic. "Can't afford any trouble, tenants. You understand?" She didn't argue. She just nodded, though her hands trembled as she closed the door. That night, she sat beside her grandmother's bed, counting the few bills left in her tin box. Enough for 4 days of food. Not enough for medicine. Certainly not enough for rent. Her grandmother's soft voice broke the silence. "Baby, you shouldn't cry where people can see you. Makes them think they won." Amara smiled faintly, brushing her grandmother's hand. "I'm not crying, Grandma." "Good," the old woman whispered. "Because God doesn't give his strongest soldiers an easy war." Amara wanted to believe that. She really did. But as the nights grew colder, she began to wonder if God even remembered her name. Across town, in a house lit by gold and guarded by silence, Eli Crane sat staring at his reflection. His father hadn't let him leave home since the accident. Doctors said he was lucky. 1 more minute in that water and he would have been gone. But it wasn't luck that saved him. It was her. He remembered it clearly. The feel of her arms pulling him through the water. Her voice whispering, "Don't you die on me now." He wanted to tell everyone what she did, to thank her, to make them see what he saw. But his father's words haunted him. "You don't speak about that girl. Ever." So Eli kept quiet. But silence became heavier each day. He watched through his window as people came to visit his father, bringing pies and sympathy, calling him brave for keeping calm under tragedy. Every compliment was another stone in Eli's chest. He didn't feel courageous. He felt dirty, like every praise was stolen from the girl who truly deserved it. One afternoon, Eli slipped out of the house. His heart pounded as he crossed the bridge, the same one where the river had nearly taken him. The world felt smaller now, the air thicker. When he reached the edge of town, the pavement turned to dirt, and the houses became smaller, frailer, until he found the one he'd seen only once before. Her house. It leaned to one side, its porch half-rotted, a line of laundry swaying weakly in the wind. He hesitated, then knocked. Amara opened the door with tired eyes that widened when she saw him. For a second, neither spoke. Then Eli blurted, "You're the girl who saved me." Amara froze. She'd prayed this day would never come. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, glancing down the road. "If your father finds out—" "I don't care," Eli said quickly. I needed to see you, to say thank you." Amara looked at him. This boy with kind eyes and guilt too big for his small shoulders. And something inside her softened. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Just stay safe." But Eli shook his head. "That's not enough. You saved me, and now everyone's treating you like a criminal. It's not fair." Amara gave a faint, weary smile. "Fair doesn't visit our side of town much." Eli didn't fully understand, but he could sense the weight behind her words. Before he left, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something. A small wooden carving of a bird. "I made this for you," he said shyly. "It's not perfect, but it flies in my dreams." Amara took it gently. The edges were rough, the wings uneven, but it was beautiful in its own way. "Thank you, Eli," she whispered. As he ran off into the distance, Amara stood on the porch, holding the tiny bird close. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. Fragile, trembling, but real. That night, she placed the carving beside her grandmother's bed. The older woman smiled faintly. "Looks like hope with wings," she murmured. Amara didn't reply. She just sat there, gazing at the little wooden bird, and whispered to herself, "Maybe someday the truth will fly too." Outside, the wind carried the sound of the river, softer now, gentler, as if the storm itself had paused to listen. Over the next few weeks, Eli kept finding reasons to slip away from home. Sometimes he brought leftovers from dinner, sometimes just stories, but always that same earnest look that said, "Thank you," even when he didn't say the words aloud. At first, Amara tried to send him back. The risk was too significant. The sheriff had eyes everywhere, and if anyone saw his son near her house, it would mean trouble she couldn't afford. But Eli was stubborn in the quiet way only good-hearted children could be. "I can't just pretend you don't exist," he told her one afternoon, standing on her porch with muddy shoes and a nervous grin. "You saved me. That means we're kind of friends, right?" Amara tried not to laugh, but the sound slipped out anyway. Small, soft, and unfamiliar. "Friends, huh? You sure your father would like that?" Eli kicked at a pebble. "He doesn't have to know everything I do." Her heart ached at that, not because of the danger, but because of the innocence in his voice. He didn't yet understand the walls his father had built around people like her. But maybe, she thought, he didn't have to. Maybe, for a little while, they could exist outside of those walls. Their meetings became a rhythm of quiet joy. They sometimes sat by the river, watching the water shimmer in the late afternoon light. Eli asked her endless questions: what she wanted to be, what her favorite color was, and whether she believed fish could feel rain. Amara laughed more in those moments than she had in months. She told him stories her grandmother used to say to her, about stars being wishes that learned how to shine, and about rivers that remembered every secret whispered to them. Eli listened with wonder. "You should write those down," he said once. "They sound like magic," Amara smiled wistfully. "Magic doesn't live long in places like this, Eli." He frowned. "Then I'll help it stay alive." One evening he showed up with a jar filled with fireflies. "I wanted to bring your stars closer," he said shyly. Amara's heart melted. She set the glowing jar beside her grandmother's bed that night, and for the first time in years, their home felt less like a cage and more like a promise. Fragile, flickering, but alive. But the world has a cruel way of noticing light, only to snuff it out. One evening, as they sat by the riverbank, Eli's voice dropped. "I told Mom I've been helping at the library, but she's starting to ask questions." Amara's smile faded. "Then maybe it's time you stop coming here." He looked up at her, eyes glistening. "But I don't want to." "I know," she whispered. "But your father." "He won't understand." Eli hesitated, then said softly, "He doesn't have to. I know what you did for me, and that's what matters." Amara turned toward the horizon, watching the last streaks of gold fade into the purple sky. For a brief, impossible moment, she let herself believe that maybe, kindness could outlive hatred. But in Willow Creek, hope was always borrowed time, and theirs was running out. The sound of summer cicadas hummed through the evening air. The river shimmered under the fading light, and Amara sat cross-legged on the bank, teaching Eli how to skip stones. He'd never quite gotten the hang of it. Each rock just plopped into the water with a dull splash. She laughed softly. "You're supposed to flick your wrist, not throw it like a baseball." "I am flicking," he protested, grinning as another stone sank. "Well, maybe the river just doesn't like you," she teased. It was an easy laughter, one that felt real, the kind that filled all the hollow places inside her. For a moment, she forgot the fear that lived behind every glance, every whispered name. For a moment, She was just Amara, and he was just Eli, and the world didn't matter. Then she heard it, a sharp rustle from the trees, a heavy step, and the unmistakable metallic click of a gun being cocked. "Eli!" a voice thundered. The laughter died instantly. Sheriff Douglas Crane stepped out from the shadows, his face twisted with rage. The fading sunlight caught the badge on his chest, glinting like a warning. His grip on the rifle was tight, knuckles white. Eli stumbled to his feet, eyes wide. "Dad, please, get over here," the sheriff barked. "Dad, she didn't do anything." "We were talking!" "I said now." The boy flinched, tears welling up as he stepped away from Amara. She stayed still, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it echo in her ears. The sheriff turned his fury toward her. "You think you can trick my boy into feeling sorry for you? You think saving him gives you some right to be near him?" Amara's voice shook. I just wanted—" "You wanted what?" he spat. "A way into my house? My family?" His words were poison, slicing through the air. "Dad, stop!" Eli cried. "She saved me." "You know she did." But the sheriff didn't listen. His hand trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of his own hate. "Get home," he growled at his son. "And you," he said to Amara, "you stay away from my family. You so much as look at him again, I'll—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. When they were gone, Amara fell to her knees by the river. The water that once sounded peaceful now seemed to whisper something darker. A warning, a memory. She stayed there until the moon climbed high, her eyes dry but her soul trembling. The next morning, the world felt heavier. Her grandmother's cough had worsened overnight. The small bottle of medicine on the shelf was empty. Amara tried to soothe her, dabbing her forehead with a damp cloth. "It's all right, Grandma. I'll go get more from the clinic." Her grandmother's hand weakly gripped hers. Don't go alone. You look tired, baby." "I'll be fine," Amara lied. She stepped outside just as the sun broke over the hills, its warmth doing little to cut through the cold fear in her chest. At the same time, across town, Eli sat in his room, the morning light painting stripes across his floor. His father's words from the night before echoed in his mind. "Stay away from her." But then he remembered her face, the way she had risked everything to save him, the way she smiled, even when the world tried to break her. That was when he saw it. A figure running down the road toward town. Amara. Something in the way she moved, desperate, unsteady, made him jump to his feet. He didn't even think. He just ran. By the time he caught up to her, she was on her knees by the roadside, crying out for help. Her grandmother had collapsed just inside the door. "Eli!" she gasped when she saw him. "Please, she's not breathing right." He didn't hesitate. He raced to her house, helped lift the older woman onto the rickety cart, and together they pushed it toward the clinic. People watched, but didn't move. Some even whispered, but Eli didn't care anymore. Let them talk. Let them see. As the clinic doors swung open, Amara clutched her grandmother's hand and whispered, "Hold on." Beside her, Eli looked at her with a new kind of strength in his eyes, one that didn't come from being his father's son, but from becoming his own person. In the distance, thunder rumbled, soft, warning, and full of meaning. The storm that started by the river was far from over, but this time it wouldn't be Amara facing it alone. The storm broke that night, not from the sky, but from the people. By morning, the whole town knew. The sheriff's son had been seen with that girl again, helping her, running through the streets like some outlaw. And worse, it was in front of everyone. Rumors didn't need roots in Willow Creek. They bloomed from whispers and lived on lies. By noon, the story had twisted. Some said Amara had tricked the boy. Others said she'd faked her grandmother's illness for attention. The uglier the story, the faster it spread. At the sheriff's office, Douglas Crane stood with clenched fists, his jaw grinding like a machine about to break. The sight of Eli sitting outside his door, dirt-streaked and defiant, was almost too much to bear. "You disobeyed me," he said through his teeth. "You embarrassed me in front of this whole town." Eli didn't look away. "She needed help. She's a liar, son. A manipulator. You don't know what people like her are capable of." Eli's voice cracked, but his courage didn't. "She's the reason I'm alive." "You don't get to call her that." The sheriff's face turned red with fury. "Enough! You're grounded. No school, no leaving this house, no talking to her again. You understand me?" Eli's eyes glistened, but he stood his ground. "You can lock me in this house, but you can't change what happened." The sheriff turned away, his breath shaking. In that moment, anger wasn't enough to hide the truth pressing at his chest. Fear. Fear that his boy was slipping beyond his control. Fear that the town was watching him lose his grip. And deeper still, fear that the girl he'd spent years despising might be better than he was. Meanwhile, across town, Amara sat outside the clinic, her hands clasped in prayer. The doctor had done what he could, but medicine cost money. And the clinic never treated charity cases twice. Her grandmother was stable but weak. When Amara returned home, the small wooden bird Eli had given her was still on the table, catching the evening light. For a moment she smiled, until a knock shattered the quiet. 2 deputies stood at the door. "Amara Thomas?" one asked coldly. "Yes, you're under investigation for theft." Her heart dropped. "What? I haven't stolen anything." The taller deputy held up a folded piece of paper. "We got a report saying you took money from the motel you worked at." Amara's hands trembled. "That's not true. Mr. Lang, my boss, he knows. He says you disappeared the same night the money went missing." Her breath hitched. "That was the night I saved the sheriff's boy." They exchanged a look. "Then you'd better come explain yourself downtown." The jail cell was cold, its iron bars rusted and damp. Amara sat on the narrow bench, knees pulled close, her thoughts spinning. She could hear them outside. Laughter, voices calling her thief, faker, river rat. The exact words that followed her all her life, now made official by the sheriff's pen. When the sheriff himself walked in hours later, she didn't look up. He didn't speak right away, just stood there, hat in hand, watching her. When he finally did, his voice was quiet, almost too calm. "You should have stayed away." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't steal anything." He ignored her protest. "My son's confused. You've filled his head with lies. I'm doing this for him, to protect him from you." Amara looked up, meeting his eyes. "You're not protecting him. You're teaching him to be afraid of what's right." For a heartbeat, something flickered behind his glare. Guilt, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Watch yourself," he muttered, turning away. "Truth won't help you here." Back at the Crane house, Eli was pacing. He'd overheard everything: the deputies, the arrest, the lie. When his father stormed in later, Eli confronted him head-on. "You framed her." The sheriff froze. "Careful what you say, boy." "I'm not a boy anymore. I know what you did." Eli's voice cracked with anger. "You can make the whole town hate her, but you can't change the truth." The sheriff's hand twitched, torn between rage and shame. "You don't understand the world yet, Eli." "Then maybe the world needs to change," the boy shot back. The sheriff's silence said everything. That night, Amara sat alone in her cell, tracing the little wooden bird she'd hidden in her pocket, its rough edges pressed into her palm like tiny wings trying to break free. Somewhere outside, the rain began again, soft at first, then steady, washing through the streets of Willow Creek like it was trying to scrub the town clean. Amara closed her eyes and whispered, "You can't cage the truth forever." And for the first time since that night by the river, she believed it. The morning air in Willow Creek was thick, not with fog, but with rumor. The sheriff's office had quickly spread the story. Amara Thomas had been arrested for theft. At the diner, people whispered over coffee. At the general store, heads shook in rehearsed disappointment. And at the church, where gossip wore Sunday clothes, someone murmured, "Shame. I knew that girl was trouble." By midday, the town hall was packed. Sheriff Douglas Crane stood before the crowd, his voice steady, his story well rehearsed. Evidence shows the suspect stole from her employer before fleeing the scene. "We're pursuing justice, as we always do." Justice. The word tasted like rust. At the back of the room, a small voice whispered, "That's not true." All eyes turned. Eli stepped forward from the crowd, his face pale, but his eyes burning. His mother reached for his arm, but he gently shook her off. "I can't let this go on," he said, voice trembling. "She didn't steal anything," the sheriff's composure faltered. "Eli, son, this isn't the time." "Yes, it is." The boy's voice rose, stronger now. "She saved my life." A hush fell over the room. "I fell into the river that night," Eli continued. "I was drowning. No one was there, no one but her. She jumped in. She could have died trying to save me, and she did. She pulled me out." He turned to face the crowd, his small hands shaking. "You've all been saying terrible things about her, and none of them are true. You call her names because it's easy, because you believe what you're told, but she's the reason I'm still here." The sheriff's voice broke through the silence, low and dangerous. "Eli, enough!" Eli's gaze locked on his father. "No, Dad. You need to stop," the crowd murmured, torn between disbelief and shame. Eli took a breath, his words trembling but unstoppable. "You told me not to talk to her because of who she is, because she's black. But that night, when I couldn't breathe, when I thought I was going to die, she didn't care about any of that. She just saved me." A woman in the front row began to cry. Someone else whispered, "My God!" Eli stepped closer to his father, his voice breaking. "Would you have let me die, Dad? Just because of her color?" The question sliced through the air like a bolt of lightning. The sheriff froze. For the first time, he had no words. The boy's question hung there, heavy and echoing, impossible to escape. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a voice rose. An older man near the back. "He's right. We've been wrong about that girl." Others murmured in agreement. The tide was turning, and the sheriff could feel it slipping from his grasp. "Enough of this," he barked, but his voice cracked under its own weight. Eli turned to the people. "She's in jail right now for something she didn't do. You all know she wouldn't hurt anyone. She saved me. That's the truth." Silence lingered for a long, aching moment, and then it broke. The pastor stood. "Sheriff Crane, I think it's time we take a closer look at this evidence of yours." The sheriff's chest rose and fell, fury fighting shame. But the faces staring back at him weren't afraid anymore. They were questioning, judging, seeing. He felt the walls close in, not of the town hall, but of his own pride. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Eli, go home." The boy shook his head. "Not until you do what's right." That night, Willow Creek was quiet. For the first time in years, people whispered about the sheriff, not to him, and inside the small, dim cell across town, Amara sat by the window, her head resting on the cold wall. She didn't know what was happening outside, didn't know the truth had finally found its voice. But she felt it, somehow, deep in her bones. The stillness that comes before something breaks. For the first time in a long while, Amara closed her eyes, not in fear, but in fragile hope. Rain fell again that night, Not in torrents this time, but steady, like the sky itself was trying to wash something away. Amara sat alone in her cell, the sound of droplets tapping against the bars like a heartbeat. Her hands were clasped around the wooden bird Eli had carved, now dulled by time and tears. She whispered a quiet prayer, not for herself, but for him, for the boy who dared to stand up against his father in a world built on silence. The cell door creaked open. Deputy Miller entered, hat in hand, his usual smirk gone. "Come on, Amara," he muttered. She blinked. "What's happening?" "The sheriff wants to see you." Town hall was still half lit when they brought her in. The room smelled of damp wood and tension. Sheriff Crane stood near the front desk, his shoulders hunched, eyes hollowed by sleeplessness. He didn't look like the man she remembered, the proud, loud enforcer of Willow Creek's rules. He looked small, like something inside him had been crushed. Amara stayed silent. For a long moment, the sheriff remained silent. Then he said quietly, "You didn't take the money." Her breath caught. "The motel owner came clean," he went on, voice heavy. "Said he was pressured to file the report. Said I was the one who suggested it." He swallowed hard. "He's telling people the truth now." Amara said nothing, just watched him, searching for the man who had called her a liar, a manipulator, a danger. "I'm releasing you," he said finally. "You're free to go." She stared at him, eyes full of disbelief. "Why now?" He hesitated. "Because my boy made me see what I refused to." He turned away, his hands shaking. "All these years I told myself I was keeping this town safe. But what I was really doing was keeping my hate alive." Amara's throat tightened. She could hear the pain in his words. The kind that comes not from loss, but from realization. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, "but I needed you to hear it from me. I was wrong." She stood there quietly for a long moment, then said softly, "You're right about one thing. Hate's a heavy thing to carry, but it's never too late to set it down." Outside, thunder grumbled in the distance, but the real storm came minutes later. A call crackled through the sheriff's radio. "Bridge collapse on Route 12. A car's gone into the river." The color drained from his face. He grabbed the radio. "Who's in the car?" A pause. Then, "Your wife, sir, and another passenger." He didn't wait to hear the rest. The rain returned in a fury as the sheriff's truck tore down the dirt road, headlights slicing through darkness. Amara, still in her soaked prison clothes, followed in the back of a deputy's car, her heart pounding. When they reached the riverbank, chaos was already unfolding. The bridge was half submerged, broken wood jutting like ribs from the raging current. Two figures were trapped in the car below. The sheriff's wife, clutching the steering wheel, and Eli, his small hands pressed to the glass. "Eli!" the sheriff shouted, wading into the water. But the current was fierce, and he slipped, crashing into the debris. Without thinking, Amara ran. "Stop her!" someone yelled, but it was too late. She dove into the river, again. The cold hit her like knives, but she pushed forward, stroke after stroke, memories flashing. The last time she'd fought this same river, this same darkness, through the swirl of water and lightning, she saw Eli's face inside the car, pale and terrified. The window wouldn't budge. She slammed her elbow against it once, twice, then shattered it on the third hit. The glass sliced her arm, but she didn't stop. "Take my hand!" she screamed. Eli reached out, his small fingers clutching hers. She pulled him through the window, gasping, dragging him toward the surface. The sheriff was there now, limping through the current. He grabbed Eli's other arm, their hands meeting in the middle. A silent bridge stronger than the one that had broken. Together, they pulled him to shore. Then, realizing his wife was still trapped, the sheriff turned back, but Amara caught his sleeve. "No, the current's too strong." He hesitated, staring at her. This girl he had condemned, imprisoned, hated. And yet, here she was again, saving what he loved most. Their eyes met. In that single moment, a lifetime of hatred dissolved into something wordless, human. Amara went under again before he could stop her. The waters swallowed her whole. Seconds later, she emerged with his wife, coughing, barely conscious. When they all reached the bank, the sheriff dropped to his knees beside them, sobbing with relief. He turned to Amara, shaking. Why would you save us? After everything I've done? She smiled weakly, blood mingling with rain on her skin. Because your son once said I had magic, she whispered. Maybe. He was right. The sheriff's hands trembled as he reached for her, his voice breaking. I don't deserve this. No one does, Amara said softly. That's what makes it grace. Then her eyes fluttered closed. For a long time, no one spoke. The storm raged, and the sheriff held her, his uniform soaked, his tears lost in the rain. He'd spent his life dividing people by color, by pride, by pain. But in that moment, all those lines blurred into one truth, that love, courage, and forgiveness didn't wear skin. As the ambulance lights flashed through the darkness, Eli gripped his father's hand and whispered, She's gonna be okay, right? The sheriff swallowed hard, voice trembling. She has to be. Hours later at the hospital, Amara lay sleeping, pale but breathing. Outside her room, the sheriff sat motionless, his hat in his lap, his eyes on the rain-streaked window. For the first time in his life, Douglas Crane prayed, not for himself, but for the girl who had saved his soul. Morning sunlight filtered through the hospital curtains like liquid gold, painting soft light across Amara's bandaged arm. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The quiet hum of machines, the smell of antiseptic, the distant sound of voices. Then it came back to her. The river, the car, Eli's hand in hers, the sheriff's voice shouting her name through the storm. She blinked. Her body ached, but she was alive. When the door opened, Eli slipped in, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. Uneven, some crushed, but gathered with care. You're awake, he whispered, his grin wide with relief. Amara smiled faintly. Hey, river boy, he laughed, a sound that broke through the silence like sunlight after rain. Behind him, the sheriff stood in the doorway. Hat in hand, eyes tired but softer now. His uniform was gone. Replaced by a plain shirt, sleeves rolled up, the man stripped down to something real. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, with a voice low and uncertain, he said, You saved my family. Amara looked at him, searching for anger or pity, but found neither. Only truth. I saved your son, she said. The rest was the river's mercy. He nodded, his gaze dropping. I've spent my whole life building walls between people. Thought that's how you keep order. Turns out, I was keeping love out. Eli looked up at his father, eyes bright. She told me once that hope can fly, he said softly. Maybe now it finally did. The sheriff knelt beside Amara's bed, the weight of decades pressing down on his shoulders. I can't undo what I've done, he said, but I can start making it right. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a folded envelope. This is for you, Amara frowned. What is it? A scholarship, he said. The town council voted this morning. You'll be the first from your side of Willow Creek to get one. Her hands trembled as she opened it. You did this? He shook his head. No, you did. You made this town remember what decency looks like. Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, but from something deeper, something that felt like sunrise. Weeks passed. The story spread beyond Willow Creek, the tale of the poor black girl who saved the sheriff's family. Not once, but twice. Reporters came, cameras flashed, But Amara kept her distance. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because it was the right thing to do. And slowly, things began to change. The same people who once whispered now greeted her with shy smiles. The diner owner offered her a free cup of coffee. The motel manager, red-faced and awkward, stopped by the hospital to apologize. Even the kids who used to mock her on the road now waved as she passed. It wasn't perfect. Prejudice doesn't vanish overnight. But for the first time, the town had to see her. Not as a rumor, not as a color, but as a person. The day she left the hospital, the air was warm and sweet. The sheriff and Eli waited by the gate. Her grandmother, now stronger and upright with her cane, stood beside them, eyes shining. When Amara stepped outside, the sheriff approached her slowly. "There's something I want to show you," he said. He led her to the river, the same one that had nearly claimed 2 lives and redeemed 3 souls. The bridge had been rebuilt, stronger now, with a new plaque at its base. It read, "In honor of Amara Thomas, for reminding Willow Creek what it means to be human." She stood there silently, the wind brushing her hair, the sound of water flowing beneath her feet. Eli grinned. "It's not magic," he said softly. "But it's close," Amara smiled through tears. "It's better than magic. Magic fades. Truth lasts." That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned to amber, the sheriff stood by his porch, watching Amara and her grandmother walk down the road. For years, he'd stood in that same spot, looking down at that part of town with contempt. Now, he looked with gratitude. His wife joined him quietly, slipping her arm through his. "She forgave you," she said softly. He nodded. "I don't deserve it," she smiled. "That's why it's called grace." He looked out at the horizon, where the dirt road met the setting sun. "Maybe we'll start fresh. Teach people differently." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Start with your son. He's already halfway there." That night, as the first stars blinked above the quiet town, Amara sat on her porch beside her grandmother. Fireflies danced through the tall grass, glowing like tiny souls set free. In her hand, she still held the wooden bird, its wings smoothed by time, its cracks filled with gold resin Eli had brought her from his father's workshop. "It flies," Amara whispered. Her grandmother smiled, eyes reflecting the starlight. "It always did, baby. You just had to believe long enough to see it." The river hummed softly in the distance, its voice no longer angry, just alive. And for the first time in Willow Creek's long, divided history, the night felt peaceful. Some stories fade with time, and then there are stories like Amara's. Stories that live quietly in the hearts of those who hear them, whispering reminders long after the world has moved on. Willow Creek changed. Yes, a little. Bridges were rebuilt, roads repaved, and people learned new words for old wounds. But actual change never starts in town halls or laws. It begins in the space between one soul and another. It starts with courage. And courage doesn't always look like standing tall. Sometimes it seems like diving into a river when the world says you shouldn't. Amara never saw herself as a hero. She didn't crave fame or headlines or justice served in bright lights. Her strength was quieter, the kind that shines in the dark when no one's watching. The kind that says, "I'll do what's right, even if they hate me for it." The sheriff, too, carried his lesson for the rest of his life. He never wore his badge the same way again. For every person he once judged by the color of their skin, he saw now a reflection of his own fear. And slowly, one act of kindness at a time, he began to make amends, and Eli, the boy who once didn't understand the weight of his father's words, grew into a man who refused to carry them. When people asked what changed him, he would smile and say, "I met someone who loved deeper than hate could ever reach." Years later, when Amara left for college, The whole town came to the station to see her off. It wasn't about grand speeches or banners. It was the quiet nods, the softened eyes, the murmured "thank you" that mattered. She boarded the bus with her grandmother's hand in hers and the wooden bird tucked safely in her bag. As the engine started, she looked back one last time at the rebuilt bridge, at the sheriff standing beside Eli, at the town that once tried to break her but ended up being healed by her courage. The bus pulled away, and Amara whispered through the window glass, "Maybe every river can change its course, if someone's brave enough to step in." The narrator's voice softens, carrying the story from memory into meaning. The color of a person's skin never tells you the depth of their heart. The poorest hand can hold the richest kindness. The most broken voice can speak the strongest truth. And sometimes, the one the world looks down on is the one sent to lift it. So if you've ever felt small, unseen, or unwanted, remember Amara. Remember the girl who saved the very people who shunned her. Remember that your worth isn't decided by where you're born, or how the world treats you, but by how you treat the world when it turns its back on you. Because every act of goodness, no matter how quiet, echoes. It ripples across hearts, across generations, like a river that keeps moving, reshaping the land until it finally finds peace. And as the screen fades to black, the voice lingers, gentle, confident, and trustworthy. Sometimes, the smallest act of courage can heal a lifetime of hate. And sometimes, respect takes flight in unexpected ways.